The surprise was that Penix got into the top 10 and went before J.J. McCarthy. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that we said yesterday, Penix was the guy that when someone took him, it was going to be an oh crap moment. That was going to be, I said this yesterday, the first oh shit moment of the draft. Mm-hmm. Sorry, every community in the UK, was when Michael Penix went. And it was. That was the first surprise. Everything was kind of chalk, and then boom, the Falcons drop the first bomb of the night, and the biggest bomb of the night, by taking Michael Penix Jr. when they just gave $100 million guaranteed as a practical matter to Kirk Cousins. What was your reaction when you heard the commissioner say Michael Penix Jr.?
I'm not an insider, so I'm thinking there's no way Atlanta goes quarterback. And then after I saw people talking about, well, this was always a possibility that they would get a quarterback in the draft, I'm thinking you give somebody $180 million contract that this is the guy you're going to ride out with. What is it, 100 guaranteed on that, whatever you want. I'm thinking this is our guy of the future. How do we get better right now? We're in the NFC South. Tampa won it last year. They got to feel like they're not far off. So I'm thinking, everyone's talking about they're going to go get a pass rusher. So I'm thinking Dallas Turner is going to Atlanta, and he's going to bring in that pass rush. He's going to make the defense a little bit better. Jesse Bates had a big year coming in and free safety. So I'm like, this team continues to build. They got Kirk Cousins. There's a vision there. And then you hear they were like, we want to find a guy that's a culture fit. And you look at Michael Penix Jr., it just has the vibe and feelings that he could be the quarterback of the future for the Atlanta Falcons. He can be that. And then I saw everything with Kirk Cousins and his agent saying he was shocked and disappointed. And I was like, well, that's not a good start for a team with a guy coming off an Achilles injury. Coming off an Achilles, an older quarterback, a young guy that comes in now. Now I'm sitting here like, well, what is the future? Is Kirk Cousins there for a year, maybe 2 years, a year and a half to kind of be the example? Because Kirk Cousins, all you've ever heard about his time in the NFL is he's a great guy. He's a leader. He does. So it's like, do they just want him to learn and then he's going to go play sooner than we think? So that caught me way off guard. I just did not see that, but enjoyed watching Michael Penix Jr. I know his injury history and all of that, but it just feels like if he can sit for a little while and then get out there and play, he can be as impressive as he was in Washington for those 2 seasons.
Immediately after the pick was made, Devin, there were scattered reports that emerged attributed to unnamed sources about how surprised Kirk Cousins was by the move. And they were popping up like mushrooms in the middle of summertime. I don't know how good of a metaphor that is, but just move on. But, sometimes they work, bro, and sometimes they don't. So, but what was my point? Oh, here's my point. Eventually, Mike McCartney, who represents Kirk Cousins, goes on the record. Like, he's leaking and not putting his name to it. And I think at some point he finally got sufficiently dismayed and pissed off, and he was probably dealing with a client who was sufficiently dismayed and pissed off that it's time to go on the record. It's time to make it known. And here's what Mike McCartney told Mike Garafolo of NFL Media. Yes, it was a big surprise. We had no idea this was coming. The truth is the whole league had no idea this was coming. We got no heads up. Kirk got a call from the Falcons when they were on the clock. That was the first we heard. It never came up in any conversation. That's a wow quote. That's a, hey, you know what? What are you going to do? Fire me? You gave me $90 million fully guaranteed. Yep. The next $10 million is going to become fully guaranteed by next March. I can say whatever I want, and I don't like this. Now, I got some things to say about that. First of all, the truth is the whole league had no idea this was coming. That's just incorrect. We talked about it yesterday. We mentioned yesterday that that's where the woe could happen, that the Falcons could take him at 8 because they brought him in for a visit. Teams do not waste their time bringing in, like there's no smokescreen to be deployed by the Falcons to bring in Michael Penix Jr. for a visit. That's why I said the Steelers would have been in play if he'd fallen to 20. The Steelers don't bring a guy in just to screw with him and to waste their time. You got too much to do in the run-up to the draft. So, but still, the reason to be pissed is exactly what you said. Aren't we trying to win? Aren't we? I mean, this is the 8th overall pick. You could add any defensive player you wanted. You could have gotten a tackle to keep me upright, because we know that Kirk Cousins can't do anything off schedule. The walls close in and the play's over if the play that's designed isn't there. So that's what's got to be frustrating. That's why I think Aaron Rodgers, and hey, at least you got the phone call. Aaron Rodgers didn't get the courtesy of the phone call 4 years ago. He's sitting there watching the draft on TV, and they say the Packers select Jordan Love. He's like, what the hell is this? So, hey, you know what? The honeymoon's over, Devin. When you're giving a guy that much money and you got draft picks to make, maybe he's wishing in hindsight that the NFL had finished the tampering investigation and taken away the Falcons' 8th overall pick last night, because it's got the same effect as it relates to helping Kirk Cousins do anything in Atlanta.
And it was interesting because even watching what they released late last night or early this morning, the video where Raheem Morris is on the phone and he said what you just said. Hey, man, we didn't fly all the way out to the West Coast in Washington for nothing. When we came out there, we were evaluating you. We knew if you're there, we were taking you. So I just think it's a bad start for team building, whatever you want to call the Kirk Cousins free agent signing and what it did for the team and the belief of moving on from what you had last year. I just think it creates this weird vibe, even in New England when we had Cam Newton, and that was totally different than paying a guy $100 million guaranteed. And then we draft Mac Jones, because I know the whole defensive side and all of training camp was who's going to start. Some of the guys is like, man, we should still go with Cam, what he can bring. And then some of the guys are like, well, we watch Mac in practice. He looks like he's going to be a guy that's not going to play like a rookie. He seems smart. So you have all these back and forth conversations. So now you're going to get the number 8th pick come into your building, and then Kirk Cousins is going to be still coming off this injury. So I'm sure he's going to have some good days, some bad days. I just think they're going to have a lot of back and forth of guys in that locker room saying who they kind of want to each other. And I think they're going to have to be on top of that. I think Raheem Morris is a guy that's going to be able to connect with this team and build, and he's an honest, upfront, straight shooter. So I think that's going to help. But I can just see some weird vibes going on around this team, especially if they don't get off to a good start and it doesn't look good early, whether that's training camp, preseason games, early in the season, is going to create some kind of dismay I can see in the locker room, which will be a little awkward.
Devin, that's an excellent point. And how many times have we seen that play out? And you create that environment by bringing in, with the 8th overall pick, a quarterback. How many years is he going to sit? What's the over-under? 2? Do they just move on from Cousins after 2025 and say Michael Penix is ready? How many years do you put Michael Penix on the bench? When the Packers put Jordan Love on the bench for 3 years, people are like, when's this guy going to get a chance? Hell, for the guys taken in 2021, 3 years later, they're traded away for nothing.
All gone.
For 4 of the 5 guys taken in the top 15. And Michael Penix, if everything goes the way it's supposed to with Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix isn't going to play at all. I think what it just does, it undermines the vibe that they were building. And if you've got veterans on that team, and every team's got veterans, the veterans are going to be thinking, what are we doing here? Are we trying to win now? What are we trying to do here? We had the 8th overall pick for the 3rd straight year. They go from Kyle Pitts. It may have been the 4th straight year. They had Kyle Pitts. I can't remember when they got Drake London, but then they get Bijan Robinson. They got the 8th overall pick again. And let's get a guy. How about on defense? It's going to help us not just get to the playoffs. Getting to the playoffs is the easy part if you're in the NFC South, all due respect to the other teams. The hard part is winning in the postseason. You need pass rush to win in the postseason. You got to put heat on the opposing quarterbacks, especially if you have any designs to win a Super Bowl against Patrick Mahomes. You better be able to get to him. Oh, well, yeah, we could have had any pass rusher we wanted. We went with a guy who, if everything goes the way as planned, is never going to play.
We got a guy on the bench. Great name, great prospect, great future, but he's not going to help us right now. Yeah.
And so that's why I can understand the dismay. If I'm a Falcons fan, I don't know what to think. If I'm Kirk Cousins, hey, and this is the other side of it too. And I mention this from time to time, kind of sarcastically. You didn't know I was that way, did you, Devin? You've never did that for me, but
a little bit.
But last year on that Netflix quarterback series, Cousins makes the big deal, and you and I have talked about this before. He doesn't work on Tuesdays during football season when it's a Sunday to Sunday schedule. I got a feeling he's going to be working on Tuesdays now, because you know who is going to be there on Tuesdays? You know who's going to be there on Tuesdays? Michael Penix Jr. is going to be there on Tuesdays, because Michael Penix Jr. is going to be doing everything he can to prove himself to the Atlanta Falcons that he's ready to play now. I mean, yeah, he'll say all the right things. I understand. I have to sit. I don't want to. And that's how Tom Brady was in New England. He goes in there as the 5th guy on the depth chart, and he's determined to win the starting job and keep the starting job. And that's how Penix is going to be. So there was just a nice, satisfying glow coming from the Falcons. And now it's like, what's going on? And if it does make Cousins, as Chris would say, it's the red hot poker on Cousins to get him to really go all in with his time, with his effort, with his dedication, with everything he needs to do, then yeah, it may ruffle some feathers, but it's going to help the Falcons be better than they would have been potentially.
And I love that you brought up Brady, because I was watching the Pat McAfee show last night because Bill Belichick was on there, and Pat goes to Bill, well, Kirk Cousins, and he showed the tweet from somebody else. I think it was still just reported at the time that he was disappointed and shocked. And he was like, but Bill, they're paying a guy $100-something million. Like, they're not going to sit him. And then he kind of pauses because Bill doesn't say anything at first. And then it dawns on Pat. He was like, oh, shit. You're the guy you benched Drew Bledsoe, $100 million on the bench. And Bill said it. He said, when you get a guy like this in the building, it's competition. So you're going to play the guy that you think is going to give you the best chance to win. And ultimately, that's what it came down to. Midseason, we go to Brady, and yes, he gets hurt in the playoff game, but we still felt like he gave us the best chance to win. And that's what's going to come for the Falcons at some time. Raheem Morris goes over there. They bring Zach Robinson in there. Zach Robinson got drafted to the Patriots the same year as I did. Then he's in LA with Sean McVay. They got rid of Jared Goff as they went to the Super Bowl and lost and said, hey, he's not the guy that we need here. We're going to go get Matt Stafford. So he still comes a little bit from that background of the guy that gives us the best chance to win is going to play. So I just thought it was interesting last night hearing that, because I think the average person, just like me, is like, well, this is going to be down the road because Kirk Cousins is the guy now because of what they're paying him. And the truth is, when you're a head coach and you're not in charge of making those GM decisions, you might sit there and say, hey, my job is on the line and I'm going to go with my gut. Now, if I think Michael Penix Jr. right now gives us the best chance because Kirk Cousins is an older quarterback, he tore his Achilles, maybe he doesn't look the same. Same thing they said with Drew Bledsoe. Ernie Adams was on the Dynasty documentary saying, he had got hit a lot. He wasn't the same quarterback that we watched that was standing there and throw the ball. He was a little worried about the rush. So they evaluated him that way and said, hey, let's get this young guy in there. So I think that could happen with this Atlanta team. And if it does happen like that, it happens earlier than we think, then for Kirk Cousins, that's going to be a shock. Because we know during the season when we brought that up, Mike was all against. He was like, the best quarterbacks work on Tuesday. And I was the former player who was like, I kind of like that he spends time with his family. And I understand both sides of it because it comes down to spend as much time with your family as you want. Let's win.
Challenge flag. I made a beeline for you when we met in Canton.
Yep.
And I said, this Kirk Cousins not working on Tuesday. What would Tom Brady say about that? And you were like,
he wasn't for it.
Yeah, right. So
that's why I said I respect it. But yeah, right. Exactly.
I remember that. But if you want to be the guy that can do this with all the rings on your hands, you got to be there. You have to. What Brady said at one point, and I'm paraphrasing, and I'm probably going to get the specifics wrong. If you want to beat me, you have to give your life over to this, because I have.
The guy used
so
to
you got to give your entire life over to it.
He would sleep at the facility if we got back late instead of driving home. He would just go to the facility, take a couple hours so he could wake up and get to treatment at 5 a.m. or 5:30 in the morning and start for the next week. The guy, I heard Kobe Bryant speak one time, and he said, to be great in basketball, I knew I had to sacrifice being a better husband, a better dad, a better son. And you sit there and you're like, Damn, that sounds crazy, but it's the truth. Like all the guys who have rare greatness and hit levels that are, unprecedented to everybody else, they're psychos. Like that's the only way to describe them. They're just psychos. So that's not meant for everybody. And like you just said, Kirk Cousins is going to have to look across the room now, and he might run into a guy who's a little bit of a psycho who's going to be pushing him. And now it turns into, well, what are you going to do? Because at some level, he could say, I'm going to collect this $100 million. It is what it is. And I'm going to continue to do my routine and do what I think is best for myself.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.